Hello and welcome to the Hippodrome Silent Film Festival online edition. It's to day 4 and to our third live Q&A of the festival. And I'm hoping many of you will be fresh from our presentation of the Woman Men Yearn For, with music created and performed by Frame Ensemble, presented in collaboration with the Yorkshire Silent Film Festival and supported by the Goethe Institute. We have housekeeping, a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning. This Q&A is going to be 45 minutes. It's going to be recorded and everybody in the audience is muted and your cameras are off. I can't see your hands on that raise hands function. So the way to pose a question is in the Q&A box at the bottom there. And as you'll see, we have provision for deaf and hard of hearing people with our BSL interpreter. And we've also got in the background, we've got live captioners who are, their captions can be accessed if you click on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen, and you should be able to choose whether you want captions or a full transcript. You can't access that if you're watching on Facebook Live via the hub. So yes, now I'd like to invite my special guests to turn on their cameras, please. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to Liz, who's the cellist on the film. Welcome to Johnny, who's pianist. We've got Margaret Deriaz. I've mentioned her next because she appears in the middle of my screen. Margaret Deriaz, the author of our program notes, and special guest today, and Irene, who plays violin in the film, and Trevor, who's on percussion. So welcome to you all, welcome. So I'd like to say that the Frame Ensemble is a quartet of musicians based in the north of England, specialising in improvised silent film accompaniments. And Margaret Deriaz is a freelance film programmer and an expert on all things to do with German cinema, and who's, as I say, the author of our program notes. We've got a full house here, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I just would like to start off by, it just occurred to me very belatedly in the day that to ask you musicians what it felt like for you, because you've created this accompaniment, and this in effect is the premiere of your performance, and you've presented it to an audience potentially of over 600 people, but you're not with the audience. And maybe Liz, I could start with you. Tell me what it feels like to be sharing your music in this way.
Oh, I mean, it was a real treat to watch the film. So when we made the score, it was a completely improvised score. So we'd obviously, watched the film a few times before, and we actually had a meet up and had a playthrough and a bit of a chat about what we might do. But it is very much improvised. And when you're in that situation and you're performing, you're playing together. It's a very different situation, obviously, than just sitting and watching. And it was so lovely to sit and watch, because what I got out of it was really realising how nice it is hearing everyone interacting. And, you do get a sense of that when you're playing, but you can hear even more of it when you sit back and just have a listen to everybody. And it was, it's fantastic. It's very interesting.
And Trevor, have you got anything to add about how you felt about sharing the music today with everybody and the film?
Yeah, I think for me, the really interesting thing is, because we're so used to improvising the scores live to what we see on stage, when we get the chance to sit and watch the film, hearing ourselves playing it, I find that I pick up on things on the screen that I've completely missed while we're in that moment performing the score and making the score up. So it's really interesting for me to be able to sit and watch the film again and just listen back to what the four of us together have managed to come up with as a soundscape to the film, rewatching what's on screen again. And I find that part of it really interesting and fascinating, because it's not something we really normally get a chance to do.
Yeah, so nothing, you wouldn't normally be in that position of attending your own premiere. So Irene, I saw you nodding there. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is quite a, it is very special to be watching actually as a part of the audience, because usually we are just, co-creating that experience while it emerges in, in that very moment. So it is quite a special experience. And from the performer's perspective, it also, the form, all these kind of, segments, all these scenes, they emerge in a slightly, it is a different experience, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it feels in the, you kind of, I almost remember everything that happened on stage, and then reliving it. It's quite it is quite a thing, yeah.
And Johnny, how was the experience for you tonight, watching again?
I think recording improvisation is quite a weird thing to do. It feels to me quite weird because improvisation is spontaneous and sort of ephemeral. And the thing that I love about it is that it's gone as soon as you've done it. And each performance, even if it's a film is just a fresh encounter with film and an audience. And that's that can be the sort of the risk of improvisation, but it's also the tremendous freedom and the thrill of it. So to record it and then repeat it and then hear back is it's initially I found it quite traumatic to listen back, and then really fascinating and interesting, because when you're playing, you're not your consciousness is, so much to do, you're so involved with the film itself, and what's behind you is behind you. You're always in the present moment. You're always dealing with what's next on the screen. So to be able to then appraise and listen, and we benefited a little bit from that in the studio, in that we did most of what's in the score is the first take of the film, but then there's a couple of sections we did again. We allowed ourselves that privilege of being in the studio and revising, which of course you can't do when you're improvising. You don't revise. What you do is what you've got. So it's I found it quite a bit freaky, actually, a little bit strange to have an improvisation recorded, and there it is forever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
It was definitely a different experience to what we normally experience as improvising musicians. Normally, for us, we play and then we get to the end of the film and everything that's happened before is gone. It's a one-time only thing. And so you're right, it's definitely a very different experience for us to hear our own improvised score back again.
Yeah. And Irene, were you waving? Did you have something to say? You're muted, Irene, I think.
I'm really sorry. Yes,
okay.
of course. Yes, it's I think what Johnny just said, it's extremely valuable part of my experience also, because when we improvise live, it is also the energy from the audience is so important. And when improvising in quite an artificial setting for us anyway, in the studio, we kind of almost have to imagine that energy being in the room, but it's not there. So it is really, we have to recreate the feeling of performance in front of an audience, which is not as easy. And I absolutely agree also that listening back to your own sound which is improvised, it has kind of a different connotation, because it becomes a score, it becomes a composition, and I think that it is also it perceived by the audience differently from as opposing to real live experience, because it is more kind of set in stone, so to say.
It's committed. And it's funny, I was thinking, like, you know, footballers who have a sort of artificial crowd sound in the background of the playing. I don't know if that's for the audience's benefit, the crowd's benefit, or the footballers, but I wonder if you what nature that would be if for musicians in recording studios. I'd like to bring in Margaret here, just to maybe you could give us a little bit of context as we start to focus in on the film. I said a little bit in my introduction about Margaret's expertise that she brings to this conversation, but she curated a very significant 2019 season at the British Film Institute, South Bank, on Weimar Cinema, called Beyond Our Wildest Dreams. Weimar Cinema 1919 to 1933, and she was saying how regretful she was that she couldn't include more films in that season. And I'm aware it's a big topic, but I wondered, Margaret, if you could set the scene a little bit for us with Weimar, Germany, and I think maybe we can go on to talk about music in cinema at that time in Germany as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, Weimar cinema, you know, the German film industry of the 20s, was actually the biggest film industry in the world outside Hollywood. And it was a cinema of vast imagination, powered by amazing technical and stylistic innovations. The Germans invested a great deal in talent and technology in order to be able to compete in international markets. And they got a terrific international reputation for that. The thing is, you know, these incredible films emerged from a really turbulent world. Germany had just suffered really traumatic defeat in World War I. The old order had been swept away, and somehow it was a moment of change. It's a moment where anything seems possible. There's everything to play for, and people are searching for new ways forward and new values. And I think this is something that really strikes a chord with us today in our own era of like rapid change and uncertainty. And you know, you can see in the films an incredible creative energy that is quite exhilarating. I think you can see those things reflected in tonight's film as well, which in a way you could say that it's about a young man who is desperate to escape from a world, you know, the grown-ups world of conformity and duty and responsibility, and he doesn't want to give up his dreams for passion and adventure and, you know, the ideal romance. It's about living a more authentic life and sort of not wanting to let go of that.
Really interesting to hear those themes pulled out to consider the film with. I'd like to see if we could drill down a bit more into some of the things that the musicians were talking about your musical approach, and maybe you could explain to the audience a bit about how you work together, what your ethos is, I suppose, and your method of improvising. Should I pick one of you to start? Should I? Maybe Irene, could I start with you? I mean, you're on mute at the minute.
Yes, yeah. Sure. Yeah. So the different roles of instruments, they play quite a central part in our approach to improvisation. So having two string instruments brings a really wide range of emotional possibilities to kind of, so we treat string instruments as they're so close to the human voice, and they have that possibility of shaping within the note, within the sound. So we really treat it as a rich ground for emotional character build. And yeah, perhaps Johnny would like to say a little bit more about it.
Well, the films we played before, I think we've been more piano led before, and one of the things we wanted to do with this when we got together was say we want to be less piano led. I think because at the piano you know you can play harmonies, you can be, the pianist can sort of end up in charge by default, and we wanted to try and shift that with this score. And the way we did that is by, with certain scenes, saying, like if you notice on the train scene, when they get onto the train, I lead on the section with Henry and his new wife, and then Liz and Irina lead with Dr. Karoff and Stasha, and that gave us, because the scene sort of cuts between those two pairs of characters and contrasts them, we were able to use the different sort of tone qualities and different kinds of sound to make something of that. But so assigning characters within scenes to a particular instrument, and sometimes just saying, strings, play this, let's leave the piano out of it, let's see what happens if we just say strings. That was something we collectively imposed on our playing for this, and often we would do it sort of by, we talk about particular little we'd use bits of verbal imagery to try to capture the feel that we wanted. So for example, the window, the gazing through the train window shot, that wonderful shot there, we said to ourselves, time stands still. And that was what we said, and then we played it. And so it wasn't that we said, okay, so you play a long note, violin, cello, you play a long note, but change it a little there. I'll come in when Dr. Karoff appears in the window. You know, we didn't do any of that. We just said, time stands still. And you just have something which then works on everyone's consciousness in terms of our experience of the film. And out it comes as improvisation. So that's one of the things we do.
Yeah, I love. So Irene has want to say something, and then Liz as well.
I'm really sorry, Liz. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the factory scene, which is quite a standing out scene in the whole movie, because it presents the listener with a different type of sonic material, which is very much kind of experimental versus melodical. So we use lots of extended techniques and treating the instrument more as a sound object almost, and also thinking metaphorically. It is almost like in Lake of idea of metaphor, factory as a metaphor for sonic painting. So we really go into a different sound world by using those extended techniques.
Extended techniques is just to explain that, a technical term for not playing the violin in the conventional way. So
was I right in thinking I heard, was you plucking the strings of the piano at one point?
No, I would never do anything so radical. No, it was Irina who was doing crazy things to her violin.
Okay. And presumably I always think when I see a factory scene in a silent film, on the percussion, there's a chance for Trevor to dive in as well. But
yeah, I think it would have been very easy for us to decide, oh, this is a factory scene. I think we can just hear lots of short, sharp percussive sounds, so we'll just let the percussion take over and let everyone else sit back. But I think it's interesting for us as musicians not to just assign that stereotype, not to just go, right, percussion can do the factory scene, and everyone else will have a breather.
Not a factory scene though, is it? It's not a factory scene. The factory is just a little bridging section to essentially a sort of light comedy. The scene that what's his name behind the desk? New father-in-law, his character name I can't remember. It's a sort of light comedy scene, that one scene with his cigar and the business with the teacup. And what we tried to do was tease out the sort of, it's almost operetta type comedy. He's an operetta character. I don't, there's real emotion comes in when you get to then Henry's wife to be and the mother and all of that stuff. But he's straight up comedy, to me anyway.
I have to say that for me, the film, I enjoyed all the visuals and everything, but really for me, the film is all about Dietrich. It's just, she's just shining at the middle of it. And I like the point that Margaret makes in her notes, that in the film in German is literally translates as "the woman one yearns for," which is a huge difference in the use of the title and significant. And maybe Margaret, you could talk to us a bit about your response to the character of Stasha and about Dietrich, and then we can maybe talk about the musical response to Stasha. You've started that with the stillness of time, but yeah. Margaret.
Yeah, no, Stasha is interesting, isn't she? I mean, because she's quite ambiguous, and this is the first time that we see Marlene Dietrich on screen in one of her, in her trademark, what will become her trademark, enigmatic femme fatale type role. And she sort of seems to shift between being vulnerable and innocent, and you sort of go with that for a moment, and then you think, oh no, she's quite manipulative and well, not exactly scheming, but certainly manipulative and very aware of her own seductive power. And I like the way in which you keep seeing her. It's like a backstage kind of thing, arranging for a performance. She's forever touching her hair and checking her makeup and just making sure that she looks absolutely right before she emerges into the corridor, to work her charms on poor old Henri. And I think this is something you see in her later films as well. Changes of costume, that whole performance thing. And in subsequent films, she quite often plays performers as well, which adds an extra sort of mysterious dimension. In The Blue Angel, she's a singer, and in Morocco as well. And that adds another dimension where you're sort of thinking, to what extent is the character performing and to what extent is the character for real? But I think she's got quite a mastery of stillness and an intensity in this role. People said that by this stage, her co-star in a play that she'd appeared in said that she really knew how to stand motionless on stage and do absolutely nothing, and yet draw the audience's attention completely towards her. And I think you can see her doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The other thing in this film was that she was very, very keen to make sure that she looked right, and she'd been already experimenting with lighting to make sure that she could look her best. She actually went off into a Berlin photo booth and discovered that she looked best with a dominant overhead light, and that gave her cheekbones and straightened out her nose that was a little bit upturned, and she didn't like that. But then when she was working with Kurt Bernhardt and Kurt Cobain in film, she sort of drove them crazy by just always trying to make sure she was standing under the light and refusing to turn her head to talk to the various characters when she meant to, because it would, give her the wrong profile or whatever. You know, the director said she looked fantastic, but working with her was the punishment of God.
I love the fact that the thing that you draw out about her stillness and her magnetism is the thing that the musicians talk about, how they approached that really pivotal scene when you first see her in the window, and it literally takes your breath away. So could you tell me more about how you approached the character of Stasha? Was the cello always aligned with Stasha? Sorry, I should know the answer, but
it's kind of, you know, it's a bit of a fluid thing, really. You know, I wouldn't say every time someone walks in the room I'd start playing their character or anything like that. It doesn't really work like that. And I think doing this recording got me really thinking about how it does work in the whole way we improvise. And actually, as an ensemble, I know we've all discussed how we're kind of developing and feeling like simple things like knowing that often less is more. So in the you know, the really important scene when she's on the train and they suddenly have that first glimpse of each other, I think in that moment I just hold a very long note. And, you know, I could easily go off on a big, like, romantic cello solo and say, da-da, look, it's all happening. And I don't. I just think, well, you know, this is all it needs. It just needs a long note. And that is the best way to depict that moment. But, yeah, the whole sort of, getting back to the whole thing about improvising, it's kind of a three-way thing. So you've got the film, and that obviously is, you know, the main sort of thing that you're getting all your ideas from. But then you've got your kind of internal improvisation, and it's very hard to describe. I don't know if the other musicians agree. Often you're not even really thinking, it just flows out somehow. And that's the most wonderful thing about being able to improvise as a musician, because often, you know, especially as I'm from a classical background, there's so much kind of precision. You must do this, you must do that, and get everything right. But this is great because you can actually you kind of feel like you're playing emotion, and it's really special. But the third thing that is really, really very important is you have yourself as a musician, that's coming out, but then you've got your musicians around you, and you've got to interact, and it never feels like a battle. It's always a bit like, oh, they're doing that now, I'm gonna go with that. And it's just such a lovely way to approach music.
Irene, yeah.
Yes, it's really, really interesting what Lisa's saying. I just wanted to add also that because, and as Margaret just mentioned, because the film is so visually appealing, and it is so rich and so expressive, it is also so important to not get in the way too much, and also let that visual part speak for itself, because it's just so incredibly powerful and expressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that word understated really did seem to chime with my experience of your score. So I think when I was expecting the ballroom scene, which is the sort of New Year's Eve ball, which is a really long, extended, significant scene, more, but you held back. Johnny, I don't know if you'd like to talk about that scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think our trajectory of playing together, and certainly mine as a solo pianist as well, has been, to begin with, when I go back a few years, playing many more notes than we play now. And when we first played together, we played Metropolis 3 years ago, and we made a lot of noise. I think it's safe to say. I think we did very well, but we made a lot of noise. And what I think we've started to find is how, when you start improvising to film, you know, Neil Brand always says that, you know, to begin with, you play what you see. You play what you see on the screen. And then as you get more and more used to doing it, and think more and more about it, you realize you don't want to play everything you see. And that sometimes you want to create a sound within which the film can happen. So if you take the gaze through the window on the train, there'd be a way of playing that where you musically render all of the content of the expressions between those two characters, you know, the way that they see each other, and then they start to sort of, she sort of invites him, and then you see the lust take over the face, and, you know, you could play all of that. But sometimes it feels to me like most often what's most useful is to let the film happen inside the sound, but not to mirror in the sound everything that happens. And the other thing that we start to play around with is rather than the sound being a sort of something that saturates everything in the image, sometimes it's in dialogue with the image. So if you look at some of the train scene, for example, it's really clear, or indeed the Dietrich, the Stasha's death. The music comes in with these little phrases, little breaths in between action on the screen, as though it serves up a moment of action, and the action happens, but without musical comment, and then the music picks up again, and then action happens. So it's that. There are all sorts of different dynamics that in terms of the relationship that the music can have with the screen. And the more we do it, I think the less and less it is about playing what you see, because your emotional impulse for the film is, oh, I'm feeling this, I want to put it into the music. But then the conscious mind, the deliberative mind needs to cut in, and you need to say, actually, no, let's let this happen, let's hold back, now let's play. And we feel that as a quartet. We try to feel that as a quartet, and we are communicating with each other. We're not just communicating with the audience through the sounds that we make, we're communicating with each other through the sounds that we make. Mm-hmm. So we're reading each other's ideas, we're reading each other's consciousness as you sort of respond, that's what she's doing, okay. Yeah, so it's, but the holding back is really important, but you can only hold back when the film is brilliant. If the film is really, really good, because the truth is, the film doesn't need us. I've watched this film with no music at all, and it's brilliant. So, and it's really good to do that to begin with, because you feel all the rhythms in the film and think, oh God, I don't want to smother all those rhythms, because they're just so right. And so you want to I'm sorry, I'm rattling on, but it's an inspiring film, because if you do watch it with no sound at all, just watch it silently. It has so much sound coming from the screen, so much rhythm, so much pulse, so much flow, that musicians, you don't want to tread all over that. I'm pleased we played so little in there.
and I think that's Margaret, could I just bring? Sorry, Trevor. I'll just bring Margaret in quickly, because go on, Margaret. What you're going to say?
So I just really wanted to congratulate you all on this score, and to say how much I love that restraint about it, how it lets the film breathe, and the little moments of stillness, as well as what you've just been talking about, the way that it feels like a conversation between the instruments that reflects the relationships of the characters and the emotional shifts. It's just so brilliantly done. Yeah. In the scene in the corridor where Henri and Stasha are confronting each other, it almost, there's a sort of pulse that feels like their heartbeats practically, which I really love. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say, you've described what you've achieved brilliantly. It really does come across like that to an audience member like me, or like Ali, I suspect. Yeah,
absolutely. And Trevor, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Johnny's point there, that it's so important to allow the film that space to breathe itself. There's so many points, certainly in a film like this, sort of very much a high melodrama film, where you can hear sounds happening in your mind's ear, in your inner ear, without any sound happening from the musicians at all, just from what you can see on stage. But I think that that can very much change with a different style of film. So Johnny's point about sort of reacting to what you see on the screen, the first sort of few films that I played with Johnny were very different. They were sort of Chaplin and Keaton and Harold Lloyd and comedies like that. And I found myself very much more reacting to absolutely everything that happened on stage. And I think that in that style of film, you can react to the screen much more. But in a film like this one tonight, we've all got to take that step back as musicians to allow the film that space to breathe itself.
I think there's a certain expectation if you're watching a Laurel and Hardy and somebody gets clonked on the head, you kind of do want to hear a clonk kind of some kind. But
can I just say something about Trevor's percussion playing? Because I just want to say this because Trevor's a very modest percussion player. He doesn't show off when he plays, and this film needed tremendous subtlety in percussion. One of the things we do when Trevor and I play film, we've played many films now, is that we have a conversation on the phone about what sort of sound palette we're going to work with and what sort of film it is. And for a film like this, what we tend to say, and what we said on this one, Trevor, is that this is all little shimmers and subtle details, and it's not a film with lots and lots of bits and bobs, I mean, you did bring every percussion instrument you didn't play most of them. And it might sound like it's not a percussion heavy film. There's not lots of, musically it's much more about the violin, the cello and the piano. But what Trevor does in this film is play the story, feel the breathing and the emotional arcs of the characters, feel the emotion, feel the shape of the scenes, and try and shape that with little sort of cymbal shimmers and little pointed moments, and it's very gentle, thoughtful percussion playing. And it might sound like it's really, really easy to do, but it's not, because it's narrative percussion playing. And the reason I love playing with Trevor so much is he's so good at that. And sometimes we get to do films where we get to show off, when we play Ben-Hur and he's bringing chains, and he's doing massive chains and iron bars and all sorts of amazing sounds. But sometimes it's just a cymbal, a few drums, and he's just shaping the emotional arc of a scene, and breaking your heart and making you go, oh. And there's I just want to, I hope people picked up on those feelings, but it's not easy to do, and Trevor does it.
Margaret was going to respond, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to say I really felt those little cymbal, not shimmers for me, but shivers, punctuating the film, like little ominous rumblings, and that give you a sense of foreboding, like little warning signals that all is not right.
Yeah,
I feel that's a brilliant thread going through the score.
Playing the subtext as well as the text.
I hope that's how you meant it.
Oh, thank you all. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that subtlety to percussion playing is so important for a film like this. It doesn't want to be, there's nothing that's brash and in your face, but if I can colour what Irene, Liz and Johnny are playing, and I can just add that little punctuation to it, then I sort of felt that was my job in this film, rather than being to the forefront. It's very much a more subtle context in terms of percussion sounds for this film.
It was lovely. Like at the beginning, there's the shimmer as you're out in the street and you're just about to enter in with the camera in, and it's into the bar scene. There's a question here that's from, they haven't said who they are, but it's in 2020, it was Irene and Johnny who were billed to perform for this film. Can you talk a little about how the score has developed since then to include 4 musicians instead of 2? Irene, maybe you'd like to take that one.
I think when we are 4, there is more time to breathe, really. And also it feels so just much more spacious and much more we can build on each other and also give the character more space to breathe somehow. Yes, I don't know if anyone would like to say any more about it, but also it is Johnny, would you like to?
We've played, Irina and I have played together quite a bit, and Trevor and I have played together quite a bit, and Liz and I have played up one film together, haven't we? Just you and me. So we've played in all sorts of combinations. Going from piano and violin to piano, violin, cello, and percussion is the challenge of playing as a quartet with 2 tonal instruments as well as the piano. So violin, cello, piano all play notes. When I play with Trevor, I can go harmonically anywhere I want, because Trevor doesn't play notes unless he's playing his xylophone or his glockenspiel. You know, he's playing percussive sounds. As soon as it's piano and violin, Irina and I have to be thinking about how our harmonies fit together, and we want to establish a sound world in which some degree of discord is acceptable, because we both like discords. They're really useful dramatically. But when you've got two stringed instruments in the piano, you've got a higher risk situation. It's much easier to end up with someone's note feeling to the audience like it doesn't belong. So all of the moves we make from one note to the next, from one chord to the next, we have to get used to understanding what our musical personalities are like. I mean, Irina and Liz could tell you about all the places I will go from one chord to the other. They will have figured out my habits and my cliches. You know, so I mean, we get to know each other. But the other thing is that there are moments in the score where we're just thinking about what's she going to do. She's going to do that. Okay, I'm going to go here. And we are moving sequentially rather than all together. And one of the things you learn to do when there's three tonal instruments is not to all move together. Music is all about moving from, you know, one note to the next, to the next, to the next. If all three of us move together and someone moves to a place that doesn't fit with the other two, then you have an issue. So often you'll hear the strings holding a note, and I'll be on a certain chord, and I'll be thinking about, okay, where can I go that will work with that note, but will make it sound different and send us off in a different direction. And so we have less freedom when we play as a four, because you have to be working the harmonies in a way that works for all four of us. You have less freedom, but what you have in the positive side is a massive amount of extra color. And because the strings can do things that the piano can't. The piano is a percussion instrument, essentially. You know, you just go plonk, plonk, plonk. You know, you can't do anything to the note once you've played it. All you can do is let it ring or release it. Whereas the strings can shape every bit of their sound, every bit in the middle. They can break your heart in a way the piano just can't. So you know, there's all of that extra quality you get. But playing with three tonal instruments means developing strategies to mitigate risk. And a lot of what we do there is unspoken. You know, we don't really discuss it. We just sort of figure out through unwanted moments of crunchiness how to avoid them. There's one moment in this score where I play a note that I really wish I hadn't played. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And maybe you know. And there's one moment where I play a note. No, Irina plays a note, and then I play a note, and it's not quite right, but we hold our nerve, and at the next moment we just make a change, and then that's working right. And so you have to work with how it unfolds. You can't revise anything. And if Neil Brand always says, I'm always quoting Neil. Neil Brand always says, if you play a wrong note, play it again. Because there aren't wrong notes. You know, philosophically, in a way, there aren't wrong notes in improvisation. There are inconvenient notes. There are uncomfortable notes. There are problematic notes. I mean, you can test that theory to destruction. But it's
so clear, Johnny, that the relationship, this sort of synchronicity and the understanding that you have for the film is also matched by the synchronicity and understanding and connection that you have for each other, and how important that is to creating your music together. And we've only got like 2 minutes left, and I just want to quickly ask Margaret to, maybe it's unfair, just to sort of quickly tell us something about Marlene. It's a jump away from what we were talking about, but why Dietrich claimed she never worked in silent film. If you can tell us in 2 minutes, and then I'm going to be able to wrap up.
Well, she was just really into controlling her image and her brand, and she wanted to promote that myth of her discovery by Joseph von Sternberg, you know, in The Blue Angel, her first sound film that made her an international star. And basically, you know, the story of overnight success is a great deal more glamorous, and it's a better story than that of a long slog of over many years. And also, I mean, she was sensitive about her age, and if she admitted to having been in silent films, you know, that would make her seem older. And basically, you know, to some extent, it's fair enough, because most of her silent films, apart from this one, they don't correspond to her iconic brand, you know, that she subsequently shaped. She's kind of curator of her own image and legend. And I suppose it's a bit like poets, you know, when they're putting together their collected poems, don't necessarily want to include their juvenilia. So,
well, I'm so glad that we've had this chance to, though, enjoy Marlene Dietrich in this silent film, her silent work, and really enjoyed this conversation. I feel I can just sense, even though it's virtual, that the attendees in the audience are rapt as well, and the comments have been really nice. I'm going to wind up with one of the questions. We've slightly run over time, but it's somebody saying, I love tonight's score. I wondered what's next for Frame Ensemble. Have you other films you're playing for in the future? Will Women Men Yearn For be at other festivals? There's lots of questions there, but basically you've got 1 minute and then we'll all switch over to the hub. But you just tell us where Frame Ensemble are going next.
We're going to be playing this film in Sheffield at the Abbeydale Picture House on the 20th of June. We're then putting together a series of events for Harrogate, Leeds, Sheffield and York through July and then through into the autumn. And we'll be back then at Yorkshire Silent Film Festival this October. So we are hoping for a busy 2021.
Yeah.
If
Hoping. Fantastic. Well, look, it's been such a rich conversation, and I feel like I've learned so much about your musical approach, and really had my mind altered on the ways of thinking about improvisation as well, and accompaniment. And I've really appreciated Margaret's insights too. Thank you so much to all of you. So definitely check out Yorkshire Silent Film Festival. Obviously they've got a website and you can go there. This was a first of hopefully more collaborations with HippFest, and it's been very fruitful. So join us in the hub. The musicians are going to be popping over there, so all those other questions and comments that have stacked up, hopefully you can pick those up. Tonight's DJ in residence is Nick Mortimer, who has curated another excellent Spotify playlist. So again, you can click on the link in the hub. And I will see you tomorrow for, sadly, the final day of HippFest online edition, kicking off at 11 o'clock in the morning, Scottish time, with Newfound Sound. And I hope you can all join us there. Thank you very much. Good night.